So last week we started discussing who wrote the last 8 pesukim of the Torah. The Gemara in Menachos, the Gemara in Baba Basra discusses whether it was Moshe Rabbeinu or whether it was Yehoshua. And each have the pros and cons. As Rabbi Shimon writes that it was Moshe Rabbeinu. Of course, it's Torah's Moshe. He wrote everything. So how could he write Vayam Hashem Moshe? How could you write your own obituary? It's Miksei Keshikra. It looks like a lie. He was alive and he was writing. Therefore, he wrote it differently. He wrote it b'demos. We'll get to in a second what that means. And Rabbi Shua says, you're right. How could Moshe write it? It's Miksei Keshikra. It was Yoshua who wrote the last 8 pesukim. So that's a machlokes.
What's Miksei Keshikra mean?
Miksei looks like an appearance of a lie. And so the Rambam passes like Rav Shimon, there was Moshe Rabbeinu. So what are different opinions, whether he wrote it, how did he write it differently? So Rashi writes he wrote it in tears. And it means mitok sorrow. The tsar, he knew death was imminent, and he appreciated life, the opportunity of doing mitzvahs. And therefore mitok sorrow, that's why he was crying. He knew his last chance to do a mitzvah and get all that schar in Olam Haba. You can't get it anywhere else. Once you die, it's all over. Meisim chafshi min ha-mitzvahs. When a dead person's exempt from mitzvahs, that's the pro. The negative is that's it, no more schar anymore for it. That's how Rashi learns. Then we had the Maharsha, who basically is explaining why it wasn't Miksei Keshikra, why it's not a lie what Moshe did, is because number one is, by Kol Torah Kulo, it says, Kadosh Baruch Hu told it to Moshe. Moshe Omer the Kosei. Moshe said it and wrote it. But the last 8 pesukim, Hashem said it, and Moshe just said it over. Moshe just wrote it. He didn't say it over. So what does that accomplish? The Maharsha writes. He says, number one is he didn't say it. So number one, he didn't actually do a direct lie. And secondly, we have a halachic principle on Shabbos as well as on Kol Torah Kulo, whether it's regarding the writing of ksiva, it has to be a davar hamiskayim. To be labeled ksiva, it has to be something that's lasting. You can't write a get or a ksuva on your window in the fog when you start making little letters that disappear, or going on the beach. Even if you have a nice wedding at the beach, you can't write the ksuva in the sand because, for many reasons, but one, because it's not considered ksiva. So therefore the Maharsha wants to say it's not Miksei Keshikra because number one, he didn't actually say it, and secondly, he didn't write it either. And some people mistakenly quote the Maharsha saying, oh, you're allowed to cheat on your taxes now because I'm not saying anything, I'm just writing the wrong numbers. And they use a grama pen, no, just kidding. So either way, that's the Maharsha. And the Vilna Gaon points out that Elu v'Elu Divrei Elokim Chayim, they're both right. That how could they both be right? You're right also. How could they both be right? So they point out that based on the Ramban in the introduction to Bereshis, the Torah in its pristine state was Shmoso Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we looked at the Torah and created the world. So really, it'd be one big name of Hashem or many names of Hashem. We wouldn't understand the word of it. And then on Har Sinai, they deciphered the code for us. God told it to Moshe. Moshe wrote it in our language. So the Gemara says it's no kasha, Elu v'Elu. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the whole Torah, but he wrote the last 8 pesukim in its pristine state. He didn't write Vayam Hashem Moshe. He didn't know what he was writing. He didn't write. God didn't decipher the last 8 pesukim to him. And then after Moshe's death, then Yehoshua came along and finished off the Torah. So different explanations we gave last week in terms of who wrote the last 8 pesukim and the difficulties in each direction and some possible solutions. To continue on, the Gemara goes on to another issue. So my nafkamina, who cares who wrote the last 8 pesukim? Is it Moshe, Joshua? But the bottom line is, there seems to be, what halachic difference is all I want to know is there a halachic difference between the last 8 pesukim and the rest of the Torah? Bottom line, whether you say Yoshua wrote it, Moshe, I'm interested in bottom line halacha l'maisa. Is there any distinction? My nafkamina. So the Gemara says yes. The Gemara says there's an interesting halacha called Yachid Korei Osam. Whatever that means, we'll explain right now. A Yachid reads them. The last 8 pesukim, a Yachid can do it. So what does that mean exactly? That the last 8 pesukim, a Yachid, literally an individual, could do it. So some explain, what does that mean, Yachid Korei Osam, in contrast to the rest of the Torah? So they say when it comes to Zos HaBracha, Ein Mafsik, not Zos HaBracha, when it comes to Chasen Torah, when it comes to the last 8 pesukim, which is partly Chasen Torah starts a little before that, Ma'onah, since I read it. My once a year I come out of retirement and I learn. So, Ein Mafsikin, that we can't split it up. In other words, Chasen Torah you can get a lot of money for. Auctioning off, which is another share we have to give, the concept of buying and selling aliyahs. Is it appropriate on Shabbos and Yontif? Isn't it like Mekach U'Memcha? Isn't it a business transaction? So we'll have to come to that share shortly, not today. So it says, Ein Mafsikin. So you can't split up, you know what, 8 pesukim, I got $1,000 for Chasen Torah twice. So no, that's what it's coming to exclude. The Gemara was on to you. Yachid Koreh, it's only one person can get it. Only one person can read Chasen Torah. In contrast, we usually, where else we find Ein Mafsikin? The Gemara tells us in Megillah, Ein Mafsikin B'Klolos. We don't break up the Tochacha. Even though it's a discussion in the Gemara, one opinion is it only applies to the Tochacha in Bechukosai, in Sefer Vayikra, and not in Dvarim. That's a separate share, but we have that same principle because we don't want to be mafsik. According to one opinion, we don't want to be mafsik because it's inappropriate. God's giving you a rebuke and you're going to put the pause button on. God, I'm not ready to finish the football game first, then I'll hear the rest. Or you can make a bracha that since every time you call someone up to an aliyah, you can add a bracha. We don't want to add bracha al prinia. So whatever the reasons are, that's the Gemara there. So we have a similar concept here. Ein Mafsikin Yachid Korei Osam. You got to do the 8 pesukim straight. You can't break it up. That's how some learn. In contrast to the rest of the Torah, usually you can be mafsik, but in this case you cannot. Another explanation, Tosfos quotes from Rabbeinu Meshulam as follows. He says, we know we have it used to be back in the day, probably before your time, that when you got called up for an aliyah, you actually read the Torah. There wasn't any Baal Koreh, designated reader. People came with a responsibility in aliyah. You actually had to know how to read the Torah. And there's no dots in there, by the way. You have to know it with them. It's not just like reading in the Chumash. So that used to be the old practice. And apparently, we reached a time in Jewish history where people were not capable or didn't know how to read. And therefore, we brought in, not to embarrass, the Eino Baki. Just like the poskim right by Kedushin, even though it's the husband's mitzvah of getting married, yet you usually have a Masader Kedushin, usually a rabbi, who does the brachas. Again, that's also, that's a little worse even because you can't even read the bracha with the print in it, with the zit, even off the video. But that's whatever it was. That's also the institution. But here, at least, there's a good reason. You have, it's not so easy, reading the Torah, at least, correctly. That is, it's easier to read it with mistakes, but to read it correctly it's a little harder. You might even have to prepare. So therefore, whatever the reasons are, sociological, whatever, education. So we instituted a Baal Koreh not to embarrass the Ola, or else no one wanted to get an aliyah. It's like trying to find someone to daven. So therefore we wanted people to get aliyahs and machabed them, get them involved. So therefore we instituted a Baal Koreh. So Rabbeinu Tam calls Rabbeinu Meshulam, when it comes to Chasen Torah, when it comes to the last 8 pesukim, we go back to the original takana. I guess that we know Baal Koreh Yachid Korei Osam. There's no 2 people, because that's the question how it works. Who's actually halachically reading the Torah? Is the person the Ola? So here we want to go with the Yachid. So therefore, if you get called up for Chasen Torah, even though that's not the minhag today, that the person who gets Chasen Torah actually, even though it's Ohev Tzedek, we're already makbid to do that. Since I get Chasen Torah and I'm waiting, So I follow, it's a big chumrah, I like to follow Rabbeinu Meshulam, and therefore, that's why I have to get it, no one else. No, that's, I don't think the minhag ha'olam is that way, that the person who gets Chassan Torah, who got Chassan Torah here, by the way?
Unforgettable event, you know.
So, yes, someone had a question?
Yes. Look, Yachid Korah Yosam, which way do you pass in that way? If it was Moshe or if it was...
No, either way, I'm saying, because whoever, the Gemara says Yachid Korah Yosam, so whichever opinion you...
So it's not a nafkamina then?
No, it's a nafkamina. I'm not asking a nafkamina between, it's a nafkamina between the last day pesukim versus the rest of the Torah, not whether, not Moshe or Yoshua.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, that was Chassan Bereshis.
That was Chassan Bereshis was...
No, Chassan Bereshis was Bill Shriek.
Is Joe Green.
Yeah, cause I know, because he told me he got Chassan Bereshis. But either way, we'll discuss it later. So we have one opinion, Ein Mafsikin, you can't split it in to make more money, Ein Mafsikin, you can't break up Chassan Torah, the last day pesukim. I guess Chassan Torah you can, but not the last day pesukim. And or Rabbeinu Meshulam is, if you're gonna earn it, if you're gonna go on Chassan Torah, you better know how to lane. Number 3, I guess we exclude many people right there. So number 3, and then it fits into the third pshat, Rabbeinu Meshulam must be working Yachid. It's the Yachid. Who's the Yachid? Either the Rav of the Shul, a Talmud Chacham, so presumably he knows how to lane, so it fits in well with Rabbeinu Meshulam. But Yachid means you give it to a special Yachid, don't just give it to anyone off the street. It's supposed to be, one of the more chashuv people in the synagogue. That's the Ramah, the Mordechai, that seems to be our minhag. And fourth answer is from the Rashash, who was a businessman. I think he was a good businessman, but he might have been a better learner, I don't know. So the Rashash says, it's similar to the first pshat, but he adds to it. Because the first explanation was, in addition, that you can't split. Let's say the 8 pesukim, you can't split it 4 and 4 to make more money. But the Rashash doesn't comment on that point. What he says is, you know what you can't do? What do we do the whole Zosa Bracha? I know, I kept on reading it over and over again. Because the minhag is, it's one of the few days a year where, at least the minhag is, people get more than one aliyah, or at least everyone gets an aliyah, and those who get Chassan Torah, Chassan Bereshis, again, this is part of this year of selling aliyahs, whether you could get more than one aliyah. But, so in addition to the first explanation, you can't be mafsik, you can't break up the Torah, he wants to say, Rashash, you can't have any hostafas. You can't go back and read it over again. He agrees. Maybe you'll say, okay, I won't split it up, but I'll just read over Chassan Torah 50 times, and I'll make a lot of money. No, the Rashash says, no. Yachid Koreosam is, you could only read it once. You can't do like the rest, in contrast to the rest of Zosa Bracha, where you're constantly reading it over to give people aliyahs. That's by Zosa Bracha, but not by the last day pesukim. So we have Ein Mafsikin, I think that was Rashi, number 1. We had Tosas or Rabbeinu Meshulam, that you have to lane yourself. We had the Yachid, the Rav, the Talmud Chacham, and 4 we had the Rashash, you can't read it over. There's a famous Rambam who has a different explanation of Yachid Koreosam. You know what Yachid Koreosam means? An individual can read it. You don't, by Kol HaTorah Kul, you need, we know, to do Kriyas HaTorah, you need a tzibur, you need a minyan. The Rambam has a very interesting explanation, Yachid Koreosam, that you don't need a minyan. So the Ravid goes crazy on the Rambam, which isn't unusual. He screams, Chai V'Kayam, he says, Ech HaMinyan Halach. He makes fun of the Rambam. Where did the minyan go? I said, it's a simple answer. I know where they are. They're in the back of the shul making kiddush. I guess I don't understand the kasha. It's Simchas Torah. Try to find them. No, so that's the Ravid's kasha on the Rambam. Well, that happens perhaps all week long. You don't have to worry about Simchas Torah in some places. But either way, Ech HaMinyan Halach. Where did the minyan go? I guess the Ravid was very mafin, no liquor, no wine, no kiddush club in his minyan. The Rambam apparently didn't have that issue. So the Rambam writes, Yachid Koreosam. So he says, you don't need a minion. So what's going on and you don't need a minion? What kind of strange explanation is that? So actually I heard this many years ago. The first time, I've seen it many times since, but when I was in Morish Koel, it's a summer camp up in the Catskills, and I was in Rabbi Willig's Koel, that we were doing Menachas one summer, and Rav Mordechai Willig, and he said we would do, so we said over this pshat from Rav Selevan-Who. So what's the pshat? Yachid Korei Osam. So Yachid Korei Osam, so the Rav Selevan-Who explains as follows. We know that when we set up Kriyas HaTorah, so there's different levels of Kriyas HaTorah. There is Takanas Ezra, Takanas Moshe. In terms of, we have the Monday and Thursday, we have Shabbos Mincha. So there was an element of Talmud Torah. However, not to go 3 days without Torah. However, there's another element, is basically that we wanted to have a reenactment of Maimon Har Sinai. We want to go back. Yishamar, as the Ramban writes, one cannot forget Har Sinai, Yishamar pen tishkach, and we always wanted to do, and that's why the Rama quotes the Chumrah from the Maram Rurenberg. That's why some have a custom to stand during Kriyas HaTorah, because that's the way they were doing at Har Sinai. So when we do Kriyas HaTorah, it's a reenactment of Maimon Har Sinai. So Rav Selevan explains this also. How did it work by Kol HaTorah Kulo? That basically, HaKadosh Baruch Hu taught it to Moshe Rabbeinu. The Moshe Rabbeinu taught it to Klal Yisrael. And that went on, whichever approach you want to take, that it happened all at one time, or Moshe taught it as things happen. But that's the way it happened. HaKadosh Baruch Hu taught it to Moshe, Moshe taught it to Klal Yisrael. So what happened at the last day pesukim? Did Moshe Rabbeinu go ahead teaching the people, by the way, Moshe died, and read about it. I was like, look how much I accomplished, look at my obituary. So obviously that's not what happened. So Rav Selevan-Who explained is, by Kol HaTorah Kulo, Moshe Rabbeinu taught it to the Rabbim. When it came to the last day pesukim, I guess depending on which pshat we take, what Moshe actually wrote, he taught the rest of the Torah privately. He had small groups, so he went over to individuals, to Yoshua, however, according to, however the pshat is, but he went ahead, he didn't teach it b'tzibur, he taught it privately. So that's what the Rav said. Now I understand pshat in the Rambam, that the Rambam writes, the last day pesukim, Yachid Korei Osam. What do you mean you don't need a minion? Like, why wouldn't you need a minion for the last day pesukim? Because Kriyas HaTorah is a reinstitution of Maimon Har Sinai. So by Kol HaTorah Kulo, Moshe Rabbeinu taught the whole Torah. So in front of Klal Yisrael, so you needed tzibur. But since the last day pesukim in real life wasn't done with tzibur, so too we don't need a b'tzibur. L'mais, I don't know. I haven't seen anyone actually not do a b'tzibur, but that's the Rambam's explanation. So let's summarize. So we had the 5 explanations, and what does it mean? Yachid Korei Osam. How is the last day pesukim different than the rest of the Torah? So either number one, Ein Mafsik, and you can't split it up. One person's got to get it, and that's it. Or we had Tosas from Rabbeinu Meshulam, that there is no Baal Korei. The one who's called up has to read it himself. Yachid Korei Osam. Or the Ramah and the Mordechai, the Yachid, the Rav, the Talmud Chacham, he gets it. Or the Rashash, that no, you can't do Tosafos like Zos HaBracha. You keep on reading it over and over again. Yachid, only read it once. And the Rambam says, no, Yachid means you don't need a minion. Where did the minion go? So let the minion go because everything is connected the way it was given Har Sinai, and since the last day pesukim were given privately, done by a Yachid, so too we could do with a Yachid.